where does consciousness come from? At first, it sounds like a calm, respectable question, the kind people ask while nodding thoughtfully, as if the universe is about to politely hand over the answer. But the moment you actually try to answer it, something strange happens. The question stops behaving. It gets uncomfortable. It starts pulling at loose threads in your understanding of reality until the whole thing begins to unravel like a cheap sweater. Because here's the problem. You are conscious right now. Not in theory, not as an abstract idea. You're literally experiencing this moment. Hearing a voice in your head that somehow feels like you. Maybe reacting, maybe doubting, maybe already thinking about something else. That experience is undeniable. You can question reality, memory, other people, but you cannot question that you are experiencing something. And yet, no one can explain why. We can scan the brain, map its activity, watch neurons firing like a microscopic fireworks show. We can identify patterns linked to emotions, decisions, even personality traits. Scientists can sometimes predict what you're about to do before you consciously decide to do it, which is already slightly disturbing if you think about it for more than 5 seconds. But none of that explains the main event. Why any of it feels like something from the inside. Why does red look like red? Why does pain hurt instead of just registering as data? Why is there an inner movie at all? This is what's politely called the hard problem of consciousness, which is scientific language for we have absolutely no idea what's going on here, but we're trying to stay calm about it. So naturally, humans started inventing explanations. The most popular one is simple. Consciousness is produced by the brain. Neurons interact, signals fire, complexity increases, and somehow experience appears. Like a magic trick nobody can explain, but everyone pretends is obvious. But here's where it gets awkward. Explaining how the brain processes information is not the same as explaining why there is an experience of that information. It's like describing every part of a speaker system in perfect detail and still having no idea why music exists. So some people took a different route and said, what if the brain doesn't create consciousness at all? What if it receives it? Imagine your brain as a radio. Smash the radio and the music stops, but the signal itself is still out there. You didn't destroy the music, you destroyed the receiver. So what if your mind works the same way? What if consciousness is something fundamental, something already present, and your brain is just tuning into it? Yes, it sounds suspiciously like something someone would say right before trying to sell you crystals. But oddly enough, it's not entirely ridiculous. There's a philosophical idea called panpsychism, which suggests that consciousness isn't something that suddenly appears in complex systems. Instead, it exists everywhere, in some minimal form, even at the level of basic particles, meaning that consciousness might not be a rare miracle, but a built-in feature of reality, which raises a very strange possibility. Maybe your mind isn't creating experience. Maybe it's organizing it. But let's go further, because at this point, subtlety is no longer an option. What if consciousness isn't just everywhere, but is actually the foundation of everything? Think about it. Everything you know about reality comes through your experience. You've never directly accessed the real world. You've only experienced your brain's interpretation of it. Colors, sounds, textures, all neatly packaged into something that feels solid and trustworthy. But that's just a model, a simulation your mind builds to make sense of whatever is out there. So, what if we've been thinking about this backwards? What if reality isn't something that creates consciousness, but something consciousness creates? In other words, what if the universe isn't made of matter that somehow produces mind, but of mind that produces the illusion of matter? Congratulations! You are now officially in philosophical territory where things start sounding like a late-night conversation that got out of control. But it gets better. Let's talk about time. You experience time as a flow, from past to present to future. But physics doesn't necessarily agree with your feelings. In many models, time doesn't flow at all. All moments may exist simultaneously, like frames in a film. Your sense of movement through time could just be your consciousness moving from one frame to the next, which means your entire life, every moment, every decision, every awkward thing you said 10 years ago might already exist permanently, and your awareness is just scanning through it, creating the illusion of a continuous story. So if consciousness is the thing doing the scanning, where does it come from? Still no answer, just more questions. Now, let's make things slightly uncomfortable. Have you ever noticed that your thoughts just appear? You don't pre-select them. You don't schedule them. They just show up. Sometimes helpful, sometimes ridiculous, sometimes aggressively unhelpful at the worst possible time. It's like your brain has a sense of humor and enjoys embarrassing you. So, if you're not choosing your thoughts, who is? Is there a you behind them controlling the process? Or is the sense of you itself just another thought, a convincing illusion generated by the system? Because when you look closely, the idea of a solid, stable self starts to fall apart. What you call you might just be a story, a narrative that organizes your experiences into something coherent enough to function. A user interface. You don't see the underlying complexity. You just see the simplified version, I am thinking. But underneath that, billions of processes. No clear central controller, just activity, which leads to a slightly unsettling idea. Maybe there is no you in the way you think there is, just consciousness happening. Now let's sprinkle in some quantum weirdness, because why not? There are interpretations of quantum physics suggesting that observation plays a role in how reality behaves. Again, not in a magical you can control everything with your mind way, but in a more subtle sense. The act of observation is part of the system. It's not separate. So here's the uncomfortable question. If observation is necessary for certain aspects of reality, and consciousness is what allows observation, then how much of reality depends on consciousness? And if it depends on consciousness, what was happening before anything was conscious? You see the problem. At some point, every explanation runs into a wall. Either you say consciousness is produced by the brain and fail to explain why it feels like anything, or you say it's fundamental and just move the mystery one level deeper. It's like chasing the source of a river and discovering it has no beginning, only more river. So maybe the issue isn't that we haven't found the answer. Maybe the issue is that we expect the answer to look a certain way. A location, a mechanism, a clear origin. But what if consciousness doesn't have an origin? What if it's not something that comes from anywhere? What if it's just part of existence itself, always there, always present, not inside the universe, but somehow tied to it in a way we don't yet understand? At this point, you might be tempted to panic slightly. That's normal, because if we don't understand consciousness, then we don't fully understand reality. And if we don't understand reality, then everything we think we know is built on assumptions that might be incomplete. But here's the twist. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because it means the universe isn't a solved puzzle. It's not a finished story where all the answers are already written down somewhere waiting to be memorized. It's open, strange, unfinished. You are part of something that can question itself, something that can look at its own existence and say, "What is this?" And maybe that's more important than having a final answer. Because the mystery isn't a bug. It might be the feature. The fact that you can sit here and genuinely wonder what you are, that's already extraordinary. Whether consciousness turns out to be brain activity, a universal field, a simulation, or something completely beyond our current imagination. The experience of questioning it is part of the whole thing. So, where does consciousness come from? Maybe from the brain, maybe from something deeper, maybe from everywhere, or maybe it doesn't come from anywhere at all, because it was never separate to begin with. Whatever the answer is, if there even is one, it's probably far more complex, more absurd, and more fascinating than anything we can currently describe. And that's the part worth holding on to, because it means reality is not small, it's not simple, it's not fully known. It's vast, layered, unpredictable, and still full of things we haven't even begun to understand. So instead of rushing to close the question, maybe it's better to leave it open, let it stay strange, let it stay unresolved. Because the truth, whatever it is still out there, somewhere between what we know and what we can't even imagine yet. And if this made you question things even a little, good. Because this is just the beginning. There are far stranger, darker, and more absurd ideas waiting ahead. And in the next video, things only get weirder.